Welcome to this special edition of the New Stack Makers on the Road. We're here at the Open Source Summit in Austin, Texas. Discussions from the show floor with technologists giving you their expertise and insights to help you with your everyday work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Omier with the New Stack. We're here at Open Source Summit in Austin. And today I'm here with Webb Brown, who is the co-founder and CEO of KubeCost. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and awesome to be on the floor here at the summit.
So can we start out with having you introduce yourself and let listeners know what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So co-founder of KubeCost and one of the co-creators of the OpenCost project. We build cost management, cost optimization solutions purpose-built for Kubernetes.
So what exactly, like when you say something like Kubernetes cost, what exactly does that mean, seeing as how you don't get a bill from Kubernetes?
Yeah, great question. I think that highlights some of the challenges here is there's this new level of abstraction that is the Kubernetes scheduler, Kubernetes API. So kind of this old mechanism of using cloud tags and just allocating VMs really doesn't work anymore. So we help teams kind of peer into that black box and really understand all of the applications or teams or projects that are running in that environment, how much resources they're consuming and what those resources actually cost. So you can then have a really accurate picture of, okay, what teams, what departments, what cost centers are actually consuming resources, or even what customers that you're providing your services are consuming in terms of cost, resources, et cetera.
And I know there's also companies that do cloud cost visibility. So how is it different to look, specifically at Kubernetes versus, this is just cloud cost visibility?
Yeah, good question. There's a range of differences, but really two stand out. One is Kubernetes itself is very common where a lot of your resources are shared across all of your tenants. So in a traditional cloud cost environment, you would say, take a database and allocate it to this application that's consuming it. Now everything's distributed, everything's shared, so it's much harder to understand and break down those costs. And then two is things just tend to be way more dynamic, right? So part of the amazing benefits of Kubernetes is it's distributed, things are resilient, pods come up, jobs go down, nodes come up, nodes go down, and things are just very likely to be constantly in flux or changing when you're at scale. Applying a lot of the core same FinOps principles, but how you do it is actually pretty different.
So let's say, hypothetically, you have an unlimited wallet. Would you still care about this? Would it matter even if you just have unlimited money?
Yes and no. I think when you have unlimited money, you're really just focused on your pace of innovation and things that are kind of preventing you from delivering business value, delivering very reliable service, et cetera. We're still either OpenCost or KubeCost can help there is we're actually identifying performance bottlenecks and things from a resource constraint standpoint that can actually cause either performance issues or reliability or availability issues. So as engineers, our background, our founding team was at Google working on infrastructure monitoring. We view costs as a really important part of this equation, but only one part of the equation, which is you're really looking at the relationship between performance and cost. So I would say if you were in a scenario where you did have an unlimited budget, you still would really care about resourcing and configuration, et cetera, because it can really impact reliability and availability of your services.
I would imagine too, in the real world, nobody has an absolutely unlimited budget. And usually you have to make some sort of choices, right? And sometimes the right choice is we want to throw money at this because it's really important. And so I would imagine there's also an element of this is lets people make better choices.
Absolutely. So I think the way we think about it, and a lot of our users think about it, is context really matters, not only at your organization level, but for each individual application, right? If you have a workload that is just kind of batch processing and it doesn't really matter when it finishes, you may optimize for the lowest cost compute or storage, et cetera, that's available, as long as the job gets done in this certain broad window. But if you have an HA or critical workload, yeah, you may be very inclined, incentivized to spend whatever it takes to make sure you get, say, 5 nines of uptime with the performance you expect. So it really can come down to the individual microservice or individual application where you're thinking about these really nuanced trade-offs.
And you're also really tying into the business. Like you can also think, I'm imagining, like, is this feature or is this application profitable?
Absolutely. So we think about like a more advanced FinOps practice, but like really the unit economics of these different applications or SKUs that you're selling. And this is one area where interoperability becomes so important, where you're able to look at Kubernetes costs alongside costs outside of Kubernetes, like storage buckets and external databases, but also alongside your business metrics. And I think that's where the like open source piece and open standards that are being developed, like it's Open Cost project thinking about open telemetry and how it can speak to Prometheus and Cortex and these other like CNCF projects. I think there's a real opportunity, and I'm seeing just a lot of like innovation to where we can just have a common language and that data can be transported wherever is like most effective for your company, whether it's engineers, FinOps, or data scientists to like make really powerful decisions on it.
So speaking of FinOps, what does it mean to have a mature FinOps organization? Like what are they doing that everyone else isn't?
So FinOps X conference was earlier this week. There's a lot of really interesting discussion there. We oftentimes talk about like crawl, walk, run as like the evolution to getting there. I think it's having the visibility you need to like accurately monitor costs across different applications, teams, et cetera. Then it's feeling like you have the tools to actually optimize, again, based on your specific requirements around performance, reliability, et cetera. And then lastly, I think it's the ability to like govern that on an ongoing basis. And I think, your reference to kind of unit economic analysis to where you can really look on, cost or, profitability by customer or by API request or by, search in your application is oftentimes evidence of being a pretty advanced, FinOps practice.
Is there anything that like a very mature FinOps organization, or I guess that's how you would say it, FinOps organization does that like someone in an earlier level of maturity like wouldn't even know that they need to think about?
There's a lot. I would say like, one of the big ones is flipping from being like reactive to proactive, right? I think it's really common for like early, FinOps teams to kind of get spun up because like, wow, our expenditures were 2x or 5x or 10x what we expected them to be, last month or last quarter. Whereas really advanced, FinOps practices are really able to forecast accurately, have all these guardrails in place to think about, managing that risk and to really be able to like dial that in proportion to kind of the growth of the business or usage of their products.
What would you say is like a first step? Let's say you're at that early level, but you've just got a bill that was 10x, and you're thinking maybe you need to do something about it.
Yeah, I think first is stop and get visibility, right? Like really interesting CNCF study from last year where 70% of teams running Kubernetes don't have accurate visibility into costs. So I think just getting eyes and ears, making that as transparent as possible throughout the organization, and using that to take a step back and say, where do we go from here? What we've seen is like actually having accurate visibility can be a huge part of the battle because, as engineers, FinOps practitioners, we all want to like do the right thing and help manage these trade-offs effectively, but without having the like data, it's nearly impossible to do that. So yeah, I think just starting with making sure you have fair, accurate, timely, and complete visibility of like all of your compute or infrastructure spend.
And whose responsibility is this? I mean, is it the developer's responsibility, or is it, I don't know, someone like the CFO's responsibility?
Yeah, it really depends on the organization. But I would say we increasingly see just this, it is a joint effort where like engineering is contributing a real piece of like getting the instrumentation in place, really thinking through the nuances of how Kubernetes is configured, or applications are configured, things like auto scaling are configured, et cetera. But finance is playing this really valuable role. Finance, or generally FinOps more broadly, of how to think about forecasting, how to think about unit economics and what we should be targeting, that sort of stuff. So ultimately, we see it really being kind of a joint team effort when it's really successful.
Does that present any like cultural challenges inside of organizations, like collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's really, on an organization basis. I see this trend towards these teams are just working more and more effectively together, somewhat out of necessity, right? Like, because there's so much engineering complexity, and there's also, a lot of like finance knowledge that may be broader scope than like the engineering efforts that are happening. So I think I see it naturally happening where there's like just better and better alignment and relationships and collaboration. But I think that like the nuances of how the organization is structured and even some of its origins can kind of shape some of those dynamics.
To what extent are developers even part of the conversation around how much money this is costing? I mean, how much do they know about like the ultimate $50 million bill that their like 5,000 person organization is getting? Maybe my numbers are totally just pulled out of thin air.
I would say an increasing amount are just aware. And, that really starts from just like this data being at their fingertips, right? Whether it's in their cloud console, on the like CLI they use all the time, in their like Grafana dashboards that they reference. But increasingly we're spending at a level to where like we need to be aware, because the lack of awareness can be very costly, from a company's success even. So I think it's like happening in different ways in different organizations. But I would say the other thing is there's now all these really cool tools, especially in Kubernetes, where engineering teams can make a major difference on this. So configuring things like cluster auto scaling or taking advantage of Spot, et cetera, like these are deep integration, decisions and problems because they can impact reliability and application performance. It's really like bringing engineers into these really cool cost optimization problems.
Yeah, it seems like bringing engineers into like really core business discussions.
Exactly. And it's always coming at it from the lens of like engineering performance, whether it's budgets or availability of resources to engineering groups, or again, application performance itself.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
And thank you everyone who's watching and listening for joining us at Open Source Summit in Austin. Thank you so much.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.